Welcome back to Innovate and Elevate. I'm Sharon Kadar, your host. We are finally launching season 2, and I'll tell you why. I went to the FDA in July of this year. It was their first ever menopause panel, and I just could not unhear the reality of hormone health. There is an ocean of information that we need to share. Today, I'm super excited to be talking with the one and only Dr. Vonda Wright about estrogen and women. Dr. Vonda Wright is an orthopedic surgeon and advocate for aging with power. She is a best-selling author, world-class speaker, and all-around powerhouse. And I think as a birthday gift to me, her latest book, which everyone needs to read, women, men, everyone, Unbreakable. This podcast episode will take you into Dr. Wright's office that we can have a better second half. What Dr. Wright talks about in the book is that it's like menopause is somehow viewed for a lot of people as an ending, but the message today is it's a beginning. And we're going to talk about estrogen, and we're going to talk about bone health specifically today. Dr. Wright, can you tell us about Miriam? I was in the audience and I had chills when you were speaking. Can you talk a little bit about why you do what you do and about the story of Miriam so that everyone can hear it?
As a practicing orthopedic surgeon, it is usual for us to take call long into our futures. When I take call, I go into the hospital and I meet patients that have been brought to the emergency room. I'm often introduced to people who have broken their hips, and they're almost always women. 70% of all people who break their hips are women, which is a staggering statistic. If you think in your own life, you probably know a Miriam, an Aunt Lisa, Aunt Margaret, your mother, who were doing okay until they fell. And then they're in the hospital with a hip fracture. And that is the story of the woman I was talking about at the FDA, Miriam, who was 93. Most of my patients are in their late 70s when this happens to them. Miriam was brought in by her family, usually at the bedside in the hospital. It's usually their eldest daughters who are there. Miriam had broken her hip. When you break a bone, especially a large bone, the femur is the biggest bone in your body, it is excruciating. Most of us don't notice our bones unless it's fashion week and we're like, oh, good cheekbones. Or maybe when you were walking your dog, you tripped, you broke your wrist bone. But a femur is a completely different category of bone. It's about the size of my arm. And when you break it, it's excruciating. So Miriam, like so many of the other women who had a hip fracture I've taken care of, is laying there in her hospital bed, trying not to move.
That's terrible.
And what happens on those slippery, slidey hospital beds, they slip down to the end of the bed in their wrinkled up blue robe, and they don't want you to pull them up because it's too painful.
Wait, I have chills from this. But what you're saying is that's preventable.
Her fracture is preventable, but not when she's 93, not when she's 73, when she's 30. The rest of Miriam's story rounds out how we have to get in front of menopause for women. She had a fracture. She was incontinent because she had never been offered vaginal estrogen. So she had chronic UTIs. Her heart was so bad that before I can take somebody to the surgery, you have to have cardiac clearance. Sometimes it's very hard for the hospitalist to clear a heart, which has been deprived of estrogen for 30 years. And here's the kicker for women, and I don't know how you feel about this. My brain is the best part of me. There's a lot of great things I can do, but this brain, Miriam, like so many other women, was having memory problems. And maybe it was because of the stress of the situation. Maybe it was because she was already one of the 70% of Alzheimer's patients who are women. Miriam's story is one of so many women. And I say it everywhere I'm capable. I am so tired of this being a woman's end of life story, because the minute Miriam broke her hip, as I was trying to portray to all those people in the FDA room, that instant, she has a 30% chance of dying.
You didn't say that, but you portrayed the drama of the metal rod going into her body and the implications. Stepping back from that, can we just talk about bone health in women and the role of estrogen? Because one of the things you did say that I didn't know as I was sitting there in the audience, you said a couple of things I want to unpack. First of all, you talked about osteoporosis and fractures, and you said eloquently that it's either going to be me or you. So I'd love to just sort of unpack that. But one of the things that really had my head turning is you talked about the Endocrine Society referencing that women lose 15 to 20% of our bone density in perimenopause. But the part that I don't get as a layperson and a problem solver is women don't even realize today when they go into perimenopause, only single digits of who can be patched with estrogen is patched. So we have so much to bridge. It's not like a woman today walks into an office, and correct me if I'm wrong, and says, I have anxiety, I have brain fog, I'm having trouble sleeping, some of the, different symptoms than simply hot flashes. But she doesn't say, my bone density went down 2% last year, help me.
She wouldn't have any idea because the insurance companies in the United States do not pay for DEXA scans until we're 65. And if you're in Australia, it's 70, which is way late in my opinion. So can I unpack a little bit of bone health for people?
Please, and if you can just assume that people don't even know what a DEXA scan is. So I would love you to unpack it.
Bones are not silent. We think they're silent. They're not silent. We just don't hear them. We think, by and large, bones are just structural. They're holding up our muscles. They give us the shape of our body. That's your bones. But bones are master communicators. Let me just run through the things bones do so people can value them. Your bones are not only the structural I-beams that give you form, because without bones, we would just be a piling heap of metabolic tissue laying on the ground. I'm not kidding. We would be a slug, actually, like a slug. We're not. We are upright. We have form. It's because of our bones. So they are structural. But did you know your bones are where your blood cells are made? In your pelvis and your long bones? Did you know how important that is? Did you know your bones are the master storehouses of all the minerals that your body uses to create energy? They have that function. But here's the most fascinating thing. Bones are endocrine organs that secrete hormones. There's one in particular I love to talk about called osteocalcin. It goes to your brain and helps you make brain cells. It goes to your pancreas and your muscle because it's critically involved in energy homeostasis in your body. It's your bone who controls your energy. If you're a man, it helps you make testosterone. So we think bones are just silent structures that break like Miriam's, but in fact, if I were designing a human being, I would put a master communicator with a reach from the top of our head to the bottom of our toes. Oh, and we do have that. We have bone, right? But here's the deal about bone. It is not an old lady problem. Osteoporosis, by and large, is a young lady problem.
But people don't know that. Vonda, can you unpack what that means? Because I think your book is a must for everyone. And you talk about how estrogen is better in the protective years. If you could start from like age 30, no one told me, by the way, that I was in perimenopause. I mean, my big wake up call was my daughter is a sophomore in college, my oldest. Last year we were at family weekend and I couldn't sleep. I think I put the clip about how I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep at night because I was so tired and wired and I wasn't patched properly. And obviously everyone needs to talk to their doctor, but I think that there is no doctor that really explains this as well as you do. So can you talk about this? I've never heard it the way you've talked about it.
Yeah. So bone starts out as a soft tissue in babies. That's why we're like, oh, be careful with babies. And as we age, it turns hard. From 15 to 25, we are creating so much bone that we reach peak bone about 25 to 30. It is critical that as very young women, we're eating enough protein, that we're impacting our bones. We're not sitting around for 25 hours a day on our devices. We're really doing the things that are going to build tree trunk-like bones. Because what happens? At 30, when we're at peak bone density, we start to decline in our bone density about 1% a year. And most of us don't even know that our bones are doing anything special at that time. And then what happens during our childbearing years is that our bones are critically involved. To grow a baby, you have 3 children. Each time you grew a baby, you used 500 milligrams of calcium from your bones a day to grow that baby. If you're eating well and replacing your calcium, great. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So there is a phenomenon called osteoporosis of pregnancy, where you will lose so much density that you'll go from fine bone density to osteoporosis. Now, the body is equipped to replace that bone, but only if you take time to recover in the 10 months after you have a child. And then there's a phenomenon. What people don't understand is that every time, every day you breastfeed, your body will use 500 milligrams of the calcium from your bones.
When should someone start looking at their bone density? When do they get a DEXA scan? Basically, is like the best bone scan you can get. When do we start to think about estrogen so that we get ahead of the bone loss? What is the secret that you know that really most people do not know?
Many women, including my 4 millennial daughters, are waiting longer to have children. So they're having children in their early 30s, mid 30s. I was 40. And many go directly from postpartum to perimenopause and don't even know it.
I had a baby at 40, Vonda, and she actually has a broken wrist right now. She's 10 because I'm 50. And she also broke her ankle last year at physical therapy. She's like, Dr. Wright, why I keep breaking my bones? Do I need estrogen? Which I realize the answer is no, but
I had the same conversation with my 17-year-old. When do I think we should be aware of our bones? I want people to know this whole story that I just told you, to always be aware, because I measure bone density on everybody. And I have 20-year-olds and 22-year-olds and
wow.
30-year-olds
Wow.
with miserable bone.
Wow.
Yes.
But what's realistic? Like, how do you get someone's attention? And when does a mom need to nag her daughter to go get like a DEXA scan and get the bone density? Like, I just want to understand sort of the new rules.
We are influenced by the insurance company. Why wouldn't we pay for DEXA scans until someone's 65? But the Dr. Vonda rules, the minute you decide that you're done with childbearing, in the next 10 months, go get a DEXA scan. Or let's find out what your bone quality is. DEXA scan tells us bone density, the mineralization. Bone quality is determined by a test that's becoming more available in the United States called REM scanning. It's an ultrasound that tells us the quality of bones. Go figure out your bones. Or if you wait, let's get it at the same time as our mammography at 40 so that we at least know the baseline. Because here's why. Here's the reasoning. We have a critical decade between 35 and 45 to get our health stuff together, because we still have our estrogen by and large, unless we're early menopause. We can establish the health standards that will become the way we live forever. Instead of 47, I thought I was going to die when perimenopause hit me, and I didn't know enough at that time. It's more than a decade now. So at this point, I know exactly what to do, and I feel like I've mastered this. But for so many women, we're not prepared, and it hits us in the head. So I would want, during the critical decade between 35 and 45, when you still have your estrogen, to start making all these lifestyle standards so that you never hit the wall.
But tell me a little more, because when I was 35 to 45, I was having the kids, as they say, climbing the corporate ladder before co-founding a multi-billion-dollar science venture capital firm. I was CFO of a $50 billion investment firm that I helped to build from $1.5 billion. So you did make a comment in the book about time efficiency when you were talking about the whole piece about strength, because you are so brilliant and practical. When we talk about 35 to 45, like what realistically could someone do that doesn't take up too much time, but could change their longevity, quality of life?
I have a lot of hope for the current 35 to 45 years old women, because I did some market research a few years ago. The millennials, the oldest millennials were young then, they were 35. And I asked them all about what they wanted from health, because I realized what they want are very different than the baby boomers. And they wanted a lot of fascinating things. Two things that are apropos to this question. Number one, they are seekers and they are learners. And I have a lot of hope for current critical decade women that they're going to seek this out and know this. There's enough of a rumble in the stratosphere. Number two, they're willing to pay for it themselves. When they told me all the things they want their health care to be different than what the baby boomers, I said, great, ladies, who's paying for this? The people I interviewed are willing to pay 25% of their disposable income to get what they want when it comes to wellness and
Wait, but
healthcare.
Vonda, respectfully to all that, like I get the huge payment issue, but I think that people don't even know what we're talking about. I almost want to know what's the bar. So is the bar when you're 35 to 45, ask your doctor for a DEXA scan? The way I got my DEXA scan, like my first DEXA scan was last year, and I asked for it from my GP.
This is how you get it. Google, how do I get a DEXA scan near me? I'm not kidding. You can ask your primary care doctor, and they're going to say, oh, I don't think your insurance is going to pay for it because you're not old. To that, you're going to say, my Aunt Miriam fell and broke her hip. That is a risk factor. Or my mother is shrinking. Or I had a fracture after I was 20. I want a DEXA scan. Or I was one of those women who thought it was cool to smoke and I poisoned my bones. I want a DEXA scan. Or I have an autoimmune disease, or I have asthma and I had to take a lot of steroids. I want a DEXA scan. You can get a DEXA scan paid for with any risk factor and by being insistent. And then when you cannot, most gyms now have a real DEXA scanner, and they're for about $99. So we save our Starbucks money and we get a DEXA scan.
I wrote about years ago personal finance for women. So I'm no Vonda Wright author, but my book On My Own 2 Feet is 20 years later. It's still a Simon & Schuster imprint. When you say that, it's like, I completely agree with you that $99 for your life. And that's what I was trying to understand for the audience. I didn't know that myself. You can literally go to the gym for $99 and get a DEXA scan. And if you're 35 or older and you haven't, it sounds like it's worth it. And then the other piece was an ultrasound, did you say?
Yeah, so there's new technology using ultrasound that will tell you the quality or the strength of the bone, because a DEXA scan will tell you how hard it is, the mineralization, but bones are dynamic. So every time you take a step, it bends a little and bends a little. And so fracture has to do with not only how hard the bones are, which a DEXA scan tells you, but how responsive they are to bending, which is what the quality of bone will tell you. And they're becoming more and more available in the United States. I'm going to put one in my office here in Orlando. They're very available in the UK and Australia.
Okay, but like, so basically get the DEXA scan. And then how do women think about when to start estrogen? And can you just talk about the profound stats laid out at the FDA? Talking with your doctor, estrogen could be beneficial, yet the massive gap that we have, and it's not the doctor's fault. I love doctors. Both my siblings are doctors. If you get a false readout and have 20 years of false readout, medical schools are naturally going to pull that information out of training. So how do we reconcile 15 to 20% of bone density being lost probably in someone's 40s, because the average age of menopause is, 50 or 51. How do we get ahead?
Yeah, of losing bone. Part of it is education. You can't go into midlife blindly. There are so many menopause books right now, and there's about 10 perimenopause books that are coming out. Let's educate ourselves about what's coming, because you know for sure what's going to happen? Birth and death, taxes, and menopause. If you live long enough, it's going to happen. So let's get in front of it.
A lot of people say to me like, oh, it's too risky, or I'm sleeping. Like, people don't know this piece, when someone should get on estrogen, and what's your sort of best case for someone?
I'll give you the Vonda rules of bones. Here's the framework. I call this time the menolescence. It is the catastrophic transition, not unlike adolescence. We all remember that chaos, right? This is the menolescence. The first step in the inevitable menolescence is education. You must become a student of this part of life. You can do that by listening to podcasts like you. Read one of the menopause books. There's going to be 10 perimenopause coming out this fall. It's not a day. It's a transition that lasts a decade. So educate yourself. Do not go in blind. Number 2, make your menopause hormone therapy decision. I believe every woman is sentient and gets to make her own decision, but we cannot make it from fear. We must make it from facts. So if you're a fact person and want to know the world's data on the relative safety of estrogen therapy, read Estrogen Matters by Avram Blooming and Carol Tavris. That book single-handedly saved my life. And you will find in there that you're probably more likely to be killed by a airplane than estrogen or all the other great data statistically. You will also find an explanation of the Women's Health Initiative data, which shows that when women took conjugated estrogen, meaning that from horse urine, which is not bioidentical, they had a zero 0.8 per thousand increase in diagnosis of breast cancer, but no increase of death by breast cancer. So less than 1 in 1,000 women had an additional diagnosis. And for that, we took estrogen choice away from generations of women. And I'm not belittling that because I was a cancer nurse in the 90s when women were not surviving. I'm just saying we need to backtrack that. So make your menopause hormone decision. In perimenopause, in your 40s, on average, it's 45, you can start taking menopause hormone therapy doses of estradiol. You can get patched. Now, the question that arises, people are like, yeah, but I'm not in menopause. Why would I take hormones? Ladies, if you choose an estrogen-based birth control, it's 10 times the dose. Like you're taking it anyway, and you're taking it maybe from the time you're 16 to the time you decide that you can't have children anymore, right? So that is not a hurdle because menopause hormone therapy is teeny tiny dose. Make the decision in your 40s, and I encourage women, even if they're still cycling, to have that discussion because if you can avoid the common things, hot flash, night sweats, brain fog, we know the severity of your hot flashes predicts cardiovascular disease. We know that women have a different kind of cardiovascular disease than men. We have microvascular disease that is critically impacted by estrogen. We know the brain is covered in estrogen receptors. And then without it, the brain literally starves.
Yeah.
And that's why we have those changes and the mood changes and the brain fog. In your bones, you go from the normal aging of bone, a 1% decline that both men and women experience, to rapid, more than doubling loss of bone density to the tune of losing 15 to 20% over the 7 to 10 years of perimenopause because,
Wow.
Yep, it's critical. Estrogen critically controls the balance of bone health. There are two main kinds of cells. There are many cells, but there's one called an osteoclast that pulls minerals out of the bone, and there's one called the osteoblast that builds the bone in return. When we have our hormones, the balance is usually about this. Without estrogen, which helps control the osteoclast, we are breaking down bone faster, and we don't even know it.
That's the part, Vonda. I think your work is so important because if people got DEXA scans earlier and knew the importance and prioritized the $99 and got patched earlier, I think that you so articulately talked about the implication of the WHI, but when you flip to the other side, and to your point, women are smart and they can make their own choices. I feel like if women really knew what you knew, that like how many women will get osteoporosis? What's the stats on that?
More than 40% of all women will get osteoporosis, and 1 in 2 will have a fracture. And when that fracture is a hip fracture, we've already talked about 30% die within 1 year, but here's the real, even from a financial standpoint, this is
1 in 2 women in their lives will get a hip fracture?
a fracture, an osteoporotic fracture, not a hip fracture.
Okay,
but
just 1 in 2 women. So when it's you or me, you just mean by being born a woman, 1 in 2 will get a fracture.
Osteoporotic fracture, because you can still get a fracture hitting a light pole with your car, but low energy fractures are due to poor bone. And so there's a 30% that die after a hip fracture. But think about this. 50% of women with a hip fracture will not go home because they can't take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? You have to hire somebody full time to take care of that person. Who can afford that on the average day?
I don't think women, as a person who isn't a doctor, but someone who deeply cares about and just love you and love what you're doing, when you're in your 30s or 40s or even 50s, you're not thinking about a hip fracture. So you're basically trying to have us be smarter about our future.
How about, I don't want to be a burden to my kids Everybody says that to me, no matter what age they are. I don't want to
Yeah.
be a burden to my kids. You're going to be if you break your hip, because either someone's going to have to pay for you to be taken care of, you're going to have to move in with your daughter, or you're going to have to use all the money that you thought you were going to give to your kids to pay $15,000 a month for an assisted living. And then when you run out of money, then you go on Medicaid, and the government will pay for something that may or may not be great, right? So let's get there.
But that's where I just want to have the message be super simple, which is this is preventative, this is fixable, check with your doctor, but estrogen can be protective.
Estrogen and lifting weights are the two most impactful ways to preserve and build bone. It shouldn't start when we're 50. It should start when we're 15 to 25. It's our daughters. Our daughters are about the same ages. They are in the critical stages of bone health right now.
Lift heavy, girls.
Lift heavy, eat enough protein, jump around.
That's beautiful. I think it's so important. And why I'm doing the podcast is I really do think people miss this point. I think most people don't walk around thinking, oh, of all women, 40% are going to have osteoporosis and it's highly preventable. I just don't think that conversation is the typical one. When I had the DEXA scan, I didn't even know what it meant. But no one tells you what to do. It's once you get the DEXA scan, it's then what? Do you take more calcium? Do you eat more protein? Do you lift heavy?
Here's what you do. And you should be doing this always, not just with a bad DEXA scan. But number one, make your hormone replacement decision. It's one of the biggest ways to get in front of bone. Number two, you have to lift weights. Our bones respond to the stress put on them. If we're not putting stress on our bones, they think they're not important. Think of what happens if your foot is in a cast. Your muscles shrink up and your bones lose their density. So you must lift weights. You must feed your bones. Bones are 50% protein. So we can't starve our bones and expect to have good bones.
You write about how women gain weight so they eat less during menopause, and it's the exact wrong. You write about it so eloquently, how it's like the exact wrong thing to do.
The wrong thing to do. Yeah, we're so afraid of our size. We should be concerned with our strength. And then I want women to do two other things. I want them to relearn balance so we don't fall over. Very simple. I teach it all the time on the internet. Stand on one leg. And I reintroduced hopscotch the other day. It's a really good jumping and balancing exercise, plus it's fun. Those are the basic components to getting back in front of bone density.
There's increasing data that estrogen can be cardioprotective and protective against dementia, which will be on future episodes. But when one weighs the risk, women are smart, to your point, and it's like, okay, do we want to have less dementia, less osteoporosis, healthier hearts, live longer? I mean, it's almost, to me, as a problem solver, amazing that those are the benefits that people don't know. And then it's like most people are 50 plus when they start to have this conversation. So I would like to say for the audience and viewers, like if you're 50, 60 or 70 or 80, like still it's okay to talk to your doctor. I think no matter where one starts, I don't know if it's ever too late. I don't know if there's like a point where it's too late for someone, but it's still the right conversation.
It's always the right conversation. And when you get past a certain point, you have to do a cardiac risk assessment. A friend of mine, Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum, that's all her company does, DEXA. It stratifies a woman's cardiac risk during menopause so that we can see what the effect might be. But to your point, and I said this to the FDA, I say this tongue in cheek to at every stage, whether it's a longevity stage or a women's health stage, listen. While the world is debating the relative merits of estrogen for the brain or for the heart, there is no debate, zero debate about the preventative role of estrogen on bone health. And given the fact that 1 in 2 of us is going to have a fracture, and if it's the hip, you have a 30% chance of dying, what are we waiting for?
When you think about the weights, because I think that's something that it's like, you have such a huge audience, millions of people follow you, but then there's also the people who aren't caught up yet there and do assume that doctors have the information that they don't, and it's not their fault. So as we sort of bridge this information gap, where do you suggest someone starts? Like I have a weighted vest and people make fun of me in the neighborhood sometimes. I wear it. It's just 5 pounds, but I'm like, okay, I think this is helping my bone density. I know I need to lift heavy, but Where do you suggest people start if someone just wants to do that, but they don't have a lot of time?
So you're asking me the one thing, if you had 30 minutes a day, the one thing you could do besides getting patched up to build bone, that is to learn to lift weights heavy. And if you're so busy with the corner office that you can't leave and nobody lets you out, put the machine in your office, put it there. And you tell your assistant that I am blocked for 30 minutes. In fact, a girlfriend of mine is the chairman. She's one of the first female chairs of a surgery department, which is a big deal in surgery land to be a female chairman.
Yes.
The hospital gym is 2 floors above her executive office. She doesn't tell anybody. She doesn't make an announcement. She goes up there in her suit and she just pounds out a few weights. And she's like, yeah, I come back a little sweaty, but I don't care because I'm going to get it done.
We got to go lift in our suits. We got to put a video of a couple women lifting on because my husband, who I've been with for 30 years, he always says that I need to share more about this concept of messy that I always talk about. But it's like there's so much on us, right? But I would totally do it lifting in a suit. And when you're like, just get the equipment, I'm like, what? Get some 10, 15-pound weights and just start lifting them?
You know what? I want everybody to progress to lift heavy. But literally, if someone is starting out with a history of Pilates and yoga, that's all they have ever done. Okay, that's fine. That's great for flexibility. That's never going to be enough muscle to prevent you from getting frail. So we're going to start with body weight and we're going to progressively overload. That's what it's called when you keep adding more weights. And you know what? Now's the time to invest in a trainer so you can learn a meticulous technique so that you're not hurt. And over 6 months, 9 months, maybe it'll take a year, depending on where we start from, you will be lifting heavy with barbells and racks. And you know what? You will not only be building muscle, you're going to feel like the badass you've never felt like outside of exiting your giant company you built. Like that was a badass moment. You wait until you're like under a squat bar, lifting more than your body weight. That is something.
Wait, Vonda, so that is in my basement because I have a 16-year-old son and a husband. They've just built that out. And I can see the influence on the rest of the family because my 10-year-old has to pick a sport. She'll be 11 and she'll be in middle school. And there's a family group text and she was like, hey, Andrew, should I do weightlifting? And he was like, definitely. And so one of her sports this year is going to be weightlifting. I'm like, that girl, maybe some more protein, but I'm like, that is the kind of stuff that we need to teach people.
Yeah.
And I should probably have some weights in my office too. And I guess to your point, it's like permission to prioritize a trainer, permission to lift heavy and read Dr. Vonda Wright's book, Unbreakable, breaks it down. It's the book that, if I think about the books that we should have read when it comes to our health years ago, I think it's the personal finance stuff that 20 years ago, because I do think women have been coded differently. And that's a big generalization, but it's why people used to ask me 20 years ago, why is there a personal finance book for women with the same advice for women and men? And at the time, women made 70 cents on the dollar to men. Now it's, I think, in the 80s, but it's still not the same.
Equal.
And women leave the workforce to take care of aging parents because they're fracturing.
Yes.
And it was like, here's the toolkit. But Unbreakable should be top of the list. I want to give these girls when they graduate college, because our generation, I want women to walk in with a pin that's slightly provocative. I think that if we can get women when they're graduating college or graduating some graduate school and just say, hey, I know you're going to be busy. I know you're going to try to change the world, but make sure you make time to feed your body protein, get your DEXA scan at the right time, get patched at the right time, and go lift some weights. Like, I think those messages are not in the traditional messaging. And I think what you're saying is, you're not a receiver of information. You need to go seek the right information. And if you want to start seeking, start with Unbreakable, because I think that tells you not just for the second half, but how to set yourself up from 20 to 50. When I was 46, my body just started to completely do things that I didn't understand. And I ended up just on a health journey that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I vasovagaled and passed out on my vomit at home and my blood pressure was 70/40 and I was carried on a gurney down the stairs and no one could figure out what was going on. But I wonder how much of that could have been at least baseline helped.
Oh, it's a triple whammy. It all layers on. But I couldn't agree with you more. Unbreakable is about pivoting our attitude that the rest of our life is going to be decrepit. It's going to be the best of life if you get in front of it. And I love your attitude that this is something that we can start at any time, best started when we're still a youngish woman.
Can you even imagine we wake up 10 years from now, just how much we will have shape-shifted the world? I mean, that will make a huge difference. I really believe it. And I thank you, Dr. Vonda Wright. You are a true soul sister. You are amazing.
Oh, as long as the message got across. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much, Vonda, for your time and for sharing your expertise with our audience. To our audience, I hope you feel smarter, I sure do, by hearing Dr. Vonda's approach to longevity. And please share this message with loved ones. Let's get the word out. The secret is out about estrogen and bone health. Make sure you're subscribed to Innovate and Elevate wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll see you in the next episode.